Hi. All right. So look, my favorite pen now. Thank you to Rachel for this. I love it. Writes really well too. Doesn't just look really cool. So, I was in a meeting um talking about Parinama this week. And, one of the things that I think was so compelling with people from all different perspectives, and I guess you could almost like use like the all walks of life expression, but I'm talking about people who are executives who've built companies, who are like incredibly successful conventionally, and then also folks who are successful in less conventional ways of having, just living life and on their own terms. And so the conversation is really about the reframing of really seeing ourselves from a perspective of, like, I'd almost call it benevolence, but more probably, like, better put, is assuming positive intent with ourselves and understanding that all of our behaviors have reasons behind them. And this doesn't mean that we are not accountable for the things that we do that cause harm, but the fixation and even the stuckness on believing that things about how we behave are, like, fixed and worthy of shame. I think so for today I'm going to be reading the we're finishing up the I guess you'd say, like, the knowing section of the adaptations and holding patterns in the first hub, and then we're going to be moving into techniques and exercises, which I'm incredibly excited about. Presenting these as tools and talking through them. Again, I say this all the time, I can't wait till this is more of a discussion. I really value, and even in these meetings I'm having, talking with people and hearing feedback and having discussions and seeing the recognition that people have as these concepts come forward and hearing their personal experience of how they relate to them. So, for this last section of the adaptations and holding patterns, we're talking about, one of the ways that having interruption in the first hub can impact us and show up as a sort of a manifestation of ourselves. And then we're also going to talk about fear, the shadow of the first hub. And these are also, so I have a very, so I think it's like what's probably going to happen is I'm going to talk about this and it's going to be exactly what it says in the passage. It's been a minute since I've read this, but the whole thing about the shadows being that in the acute phase of being, like, naturally occurring and responsive, they're life-saving. They're absolutely critical. So fear, when I see, like, let go of fear and embrace love and stuff like that, I'm like, well, you don't want to let go of fear, because fear in its deepest intelligence is a reflex that jumps us out of, like, harm's way before we can actually process it. So even the relationship with fear and understanding that becoming fearful is a holding pattern, and that is likely a survival adaptation that is trying to keep us safe, and now is maladapted if we are actually safe and we still feel afraid. So, I don't think that approaching that with, like, scorn or disdain is going to move it, but I think with, like, compassion, understanding, empathy, and, I guess love is, like, that's when you start to open up the possibility to be able to expand past some of these states in a way that's really profound. So anyway, I'm going to start reading here. So intellectualization replaces embodiment. So for the first hub, once again, we are talking about the brainstem. We are talking about the physical sense of security. Trust is, like, really the like, one of the ways that we really can experience first hub in our our lives, is, like, the extent to which we're capable of trusting that something will be there, trusting in the innate, like, goodness and responsiveness of the world. That is something I've been thinking a lot about as I've been reading this, about where I see that in myself specifically, and also, little observation with others. But anyway, so Lowen and Reich demonstrated. So this is the header of this is intellectualization replaces embodiment. This begins on page 72 if you're following along in the book. So Lowen and Reich demonstrated that the developing mind influences and characterizes the shape of the body. See chapter 2. Yeah, I guess that's in the voltage section. They believe that what you think and do changes your physical form. According to Lowen, when the physical foundation of security is not developed and supported, children tend to intellectualize rather than physically feel. Living in their heads cuts off feeling and is what Lowen called the schizoid. Anodea Judith more charitably uses the creative. There is dissociation between thought and feeling and a tendency to think through life rather than feel. The schizoid creative fears becoming overwhelmed by feelings and is easily flooded emotionally by relatively minor issues. Deep love or deep joy are usually avoided and intimacy is rare. These folks are afraid of letting go and trusting others, preferring cerebral relationships over physical and emotional ones. They also have a deep fear of needing or wanting anything they can't control. Lowen asserted that as children, no one came to comfort them in their fear, so now, as adults, they believe others will not be there for them. Often, when bodily sensation is deadened, it's replaced with a tendency to intellectualize. The so-called character structure often presents as slender or cool hands and feet. So this is a really good example about how our greatest attributes also, have the other side to them, which is that, being able to be like incredibly perceptive, incredibly intelligent, oftentimes, being an adaptation, also has this like other side to it, which is that, is that things are, and this is where you get a lot of like academic of like dissection of things, and even to a certain extent, the notion of emotional literacy, like using words to find your feelings. So actually this is like, why not talk about this right now, which is that there's like the word literacy is literally like what's used to describe how to get better at your emotions, where I would counter that literacy is actually like part of the issue, which is that it's intellectualizing of feelings. So and this might be, and in Parinama method, there are exercises in finding the words for things. So this is not to like completely, I'm not kind of like saying this is like incorrect or that I don't agree with it, but that there's a deeper notion of being able to describe feelings, such as, recently with Luke, my cat. He got some bad test results back, and as I nursed him back to health, I paid attention to the feelings in my body. And, one of the explanations was like, or one of the ways I was feeling it was like, it was like this burning, cold, mentholated hole in my heart. It was like a ball of pain, and that would expand and contract whether he ate or not. And noticing like the location of it, noticing the pressure, noticing whether it moved, and paying attention to that sensation. And I did some, contextualizing. So, I practice like George Zimmerman, not only a president of a client, is like practicing it and contextualizing where the grief was coming from, because of pulling in grief from other experiences. But also, the thing about feeling and really, and, not necessarily overthinking it, but being able to sit with the feeling. And quite frankly, it was exhausting. And, and so, I think this is one of the things where being really mindful of exposure in ways that is manageable. And so one of the things about feeling deeply the notion that feeling deeply, it's like, okay, it's not going to kill you, right? Like the thing where it's like, now that you're an adult, you don't need to worry about emotions, like, because when you have a little body, there's the feeling that the overwhelm could be, catastrophic. But there is a reality that feeling things takes energy, like to feel things deeply, and it's tiring and it's hard and it's inconvenient. So building the fitness around feeling bad things is just like any fitness, which is titrating it and being like careful of like slowly growing that. And because there is such a thing as getting overwhelmed or blown out or absolutely exhausted. So I've gotten a little off track here, but I think that there's, the intellectualization, replaces embodiment, is just that awareness that, finding words for things, while useful, is also, like there's also the counterpoint of like finding a feeling and getting into that, but but also respecting the fact that it's a superpower to be able to have a strong intellect around these things. So yeah. So it's dynamic. It's dynamic. Okay. So the shadow fear, this is kind of one of my more like beloved parts of this whole process, which is changing relationships with the more like kind of, I don't know what the word is for it. Like I was about to say beleaguered. It's not it. It's like back to the thing, like qualities that we might have, like like not like, or wish that we didn't, like fear. Like, so it's like, say no to fear. It's more like embracing fear as like as a life-saving tool. But anyway, I think we're gonna we're about to read about it. So anyway, so the shadow fear, a little bit of fear is activating, a lot is debilitating. When our immediate survival is threatened, fight, flight, or freeze get activated as the suite of reflexes moves faster than thought to get us to safety. Fear serves our survival as an acute response, but when it becomes maladaptive, it leads to stress-related physical and mental illness. When we become overwhelmed by worry, the life-affirming and life-saving quality of fear becomes life-taking. When we become overwhelmed or worried over a boss, a phobia, or an imagined catastrophe, the life affirming and life saving quality of fear gets hijacked and becomes maladaptive. Keep in mind that our brains evolved to keep us alive, not to be good at relaxing and constantly scanning the horizon for threat. So, yeah, so I'm going to reread that. Keep in mind that our brains evolved to keep us alive, not to be good at relaxing and to constantly scan the horizon for threats. When we consciously reclaim fear, we can change our relationship with it. To work with fear, we can contain it by identifying the specific event that caused it and compartmentalizing it with techniques and exercises. Instead of being flooded, overwhelmed, and reflexive, we work with the arising response and allow it to pass. Part of managing our first hub is incorporating physical release and discharging muscular holding, which I discuss below. If we must suppress a natural reaction to fear, which adults must often do, a cascade of neuropeptides floods our body, and with no way to exit, they're trapped as a stress response that gets held in our body. Because the foundation of this first hub is precognitive and pre-verbal, it can lead to an often perplexing inability to feel completely safe or to trust the physical world. But when we speak to this facet of ourselves in its nonverbal language of physicality, we have a chance to communicate, to build trust, and to potentially shift long-standing patterns. Next, in all of the following Part 2 chapters are techniques and exercises for how to create the sense of stability, boundary, and ground within the body. Yeah, I really like that. Like reading that, I really feel the love in that when I'm reading it. Yeah. Like just that notion that it's like when we speak to this facet of ourselves, in its language of physicality, we have the chance to communicate, to build trust, and potentially shift longstanding patterns. Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's that strikes me as profound because it has to do with like a really deep component of our relationship with ourselves, which is trusting ourselves and being able to reclaim that in a way that is really like authentic, which isn't like rationalizing over something. It's like really coming back to it and being able to almost like time travel back to a part of ourselves that and be there for ourselves in a way, because it's like, as it's all sort of existing right now. So anyway, thank you for watching. Again, thank you for like any engagement, but watching alone is really special as well. And yeah, please like, comment anything that you'd like to see, any thoughts you have about expanding on anything, is I really value that, whether it is disagreeing or something that resonates really deeply. It really matters a lot. Folks do tend to DM me with this stuff, and I will say one of the things about Parinama, which has been coming up in my meetings, is that the deeply personal nature of the transformation has led this to be really private. So when I'm talking with people, or when people are sending me their experiences, it just really doesn't feel appropriate to share that with the world, and doesn't feel, it also isn't, I don't believe it is, and I'm just not at the place right now where I even want to talk to people about how to use anything beyond what they're volunteering. There's a couple things on the website that people were willing to share, but in general, it's interesting that there's these very profound impacts and experiences that people are having, and at the moment, it's I think the creation of community, and the more that this becomes a discussion as I grow this, that's really going to help, because there's something really important in people being able to see what I see, which is how common and how universal this experience is. So that's one thing that is a real driver to me, is that other people can connect in this, because I get to see it. So I get that benefit that is winds up not being shared. So yeah, so in process. So the next reading, we're going to get into the techniques and exercises. And so as you see here in the book, very exciting, very exciting. Looking at this picture, it's interesting to look at this, and I haven't thought in the last couple of weeks about how much work this was. But just now I looked at this and I realized, or I just had a remembering of how much work went into the creation of like every single piece of this, and how much consideration as far as the techniques and exercises, and even this drawing, like even this figure, about how that was imagined. How, it's really loving. It is very loving. It is, yeah, both for myself and for you. It's the whole thing. Yeah, because through whatever this came to me, it's also for you. And that was a really important, the process of making this. So anyway, thank you so much again. All engagement is so like appreciated. It really encourages me. And I can't wait to see you next time. And I really hope wherever you are, you're doing really well. Okay. With love. Bye.